This isn't money. This is the end of you.
My name is Jack Mercer, and until 3 weeks ago, I was what you'd generously call a professional loser. Failed entrepreneur turned Uber driver, living in a cramped apartment that smelled like disappointment and microwave dinners. My wife Allison constantly reminded me of this fact, usually while scrolling through her phone, ignoring whatever pathetic attempt at conversation I'd made over our silent dinners. "Jack, you're 38 years old," she'd say, not even looking up from her screen. "When are you going to do something with your life?" I'd developed a thick skin for her cutting remarks over our 5 years of marriage. What I hadn't developed was any real hope that things would change. That's why what happened on that Tuesday night felt like winning the lottery and getting struck by lightning simultaneously. The old man who climbed into my Honda Civic at 11:47 p.m. was frail, maybe 80, wearing an expensive suit that hung loose on his skeletal frame. His hand shook as he gave me an address in the wealthy part of town. "Rough night, sir?" I asked, glancing in the rearview mirror as we pulled away from the hospital. "The roughest," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the engine. "But you know what's funny about rough nights? Sometimes they lead to the most important moments of your life." I figured he was just being philosophical the way old people get when they're tired. We drove in comfortable silence for most of the trip, but as we neared his destination, he leaned forward. "What's your name, son?" "Jack Mercer." "Jack." He repeated it like he was tasting wine. "You remind me of someone I lost a long time ago. Same eyes, same way of carrying disappointment without letting it break you." I pulled into the circular driveway of a mansion that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. The old man, he'd told me his name was Harold Gutman, fumbled with his wallet. "Mr. Gutman, the fare's only $12. He handed me a stack of hundreds, 20 of them. "Sir, this is $2,000. I can't." "You can and you will." His eyes were sharp despite his frail appearance. "And Jack, keep this card. Call the number if you ever need help." He pressed a business card into my palm and shuffled toward his front door. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at the money, convinced I was dreaming or about to be arrested for some elaborate scam. The card was simple: Harold Gutman, private investments, with a phone number. I drove home in a daze, the money burning a hole in my pocket. Allison was already asleep when I got in, so I hid the cash in my sock drawer and lay awake until dawn, wondering what the heck had just happened. The call came 3 days later. "Mr. Mercer, this is Robert Gold, attorney for the late Harold Gutman." "Late? He's dead?" "I'm afraid so. Passed peacefully yesterday morning." "Mercer, I need you to come to my office immediately. Mr. Gutman made some very significant changes to his will the day after you drove him home." My hands started shaking. "What kind of changes?" "The kind we should discuss in person. Can you be here in an hour?" Robert Gold's office was everything you'd expect from a lawyer who handled rich people's money: mahogany, leather, and the smell of expensive cigars. Gold himself was a thin man with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that comes from delivering life-changing news on a regular basis. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to be direct because that's how Harold wanted this handled. You've inherited his entire estate." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, what?" $89 million, plus properties, investments, and personal effects. Everything. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. "That's impossible. I met the man once. I drove him home from the hospital." Gold slid a letter across the desk. "Harold wrote this for you." My hands trembled as I unfolded the expensive stationery. "Dear Jack, you probably think this is insane. You're right. But sometimes insanity is the only rational response to a rational world that's forgotten how to reward decency. You looked at me that night, really looked at me, like I was a person worth caring about. You didn't see dollar signs or an opportunity. You saw an old man having a bad night, and you treated me with kindness. More than that, you remind me of my son, David. Same eyes, same quiet strength. David died in the Middle East 8 years ago, and I've been looking for a way to honor his memory ever since. You gave me something precious in those 20 minutes. You reminded me that there are still good people in the world. Now I want to give you something precious in return. The chance to never have to drive strangers around at midnight again. Use it well, Jack. And remember, the best revenge against people who underestimate you is to prove them spectacularly wrong. Harold Gutman." I read it 3 times before the reality sank in. $89 million. I was rich. Actually, genuinely, Never work again rich. There is one condition, Gold said, breaking into my thoughts. Harold was very specific about this. You can never give any portion of this inheritance to anyone who has betrayed your trust. If you do, the entire estate reverts to charity. Betrayed my trust? His exact words were, Jack will know who I mean when the time comes. I drove home in Harold's Bentley. Apparently, it was mine now, my mind spinning with possibilities. Allison would be ecstatic. We could buy a real house, travel, maybe start the family she'd been talking about. I could go back to school, start another business, do something meaningful with my life. I burst through our apartment door at 3:30 p.m., practically vibrating with excitement. Allison! Honey, you're not going to believe what... The words died in my throat. There were men's clothes scattered across our living room floor. Expensive clothes. A suit jacket I didn't recognize, draped over our couch. Shoes that cost more than my car payment. From our bedroom came the unmistakable sounds of my wife having love with someone who definitely wasn't me. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, listening to Allison moan another man's name. Will. She was calling him Will. The bedroom door was slightly open. Through the crack, I could see them on our bed, my wife and a man I recognized from the country club where she'd started working as a legal assistant 6 months ago. William Pritchard, real estate developer, married with 2 kids, the kind of guy who wore gold watches and drove cars that cost more than most people's houses. They were so lost in each other, they didn't hear me come in, didn't hear me walk to the kitchen and pour myself a glass of water, didn't hear me sit down at our dining room table and think about Harold Gutman's letter. The best revenge against people who underestimate you is to prove them spectacularly wrong. When they finally finished, I heard them talking. God, I needed that, Allison said. Jack's been so pathetic lately, moping around about his failed business, driving that ridiculous car for pennies. I can't stand looking at him anymore. Leave him, Will said. I'll take care of you. You know I will. It's not that simple. He'd take half of everything in a divorce. Will laughed. Half of nothing is still nothing, sweetheart. Still, I need to be smart about this. Maybe we can find a way to make him leave on his own. I finished my water and walked to the bedroom door, knocked politely. The sounds inside stopped immediately. Allison, we need to talk. Frantic whispering, scrambling. The sound of someone trying to get dressed quickly. Jack, I thought you were working. Apparently you did. Why don't you and Will come out here? We should all have a conversation. More whispering, then Will's voice, trying to sound authoritative. Look, buddy, this is awkward, but nothing. Come out here. Now. The door opened, and they emerged, both trying to look dignified despite being half-dressed and caught red-handed. Will was older than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of artificial confidence that comes from inherited money. Allison couldn't meet my eyes. Jack, I can explain, she started. No need, I heard everything. The pathetic husband, the pennies, the half of nothing, very illuminating. Will stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Look, Jack, Allison and I have been seeing each other for months. She's not happy with you. Maybe it's time to accept that and move on. I nodded thoughtfully. You know what, Will? You're absolutely right. Allison deserves better than a pathetic loser who drives for pennies. They both looked surprised by my calm reaction. The thing is, I continued, I just inherited $89 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Allison's face went white. What? $89 million. Cash, properties, investments. I'm rich, Allison. Actually, genuinely never work again rich. Will's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's impossible. I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken of the legal documents. Bank statements, property deeds, all with my name on them. The lawyer said there was one condition. I can never give any of this money to anyone who's betrayed my trust. If I do, I lose everything. Allison's eyes filled with tears. Jack, baby, I can explain. This doesn't mean anything. Will was just... Allison, I held up my hand. Stop talking. I looked at Will, who was now fully dressed and backing toward the door. Will, I want you to know something. Allison's right about one thing. She does deserve better than a pathetic loser. But here's what she doesn't deserve. A single penny of my money. Ever. Jack, please, Allison was crying now. We can work this out. I made a mistake. I love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of $89 million. But thanks to Harold Gutman's wisdom, that's the one thing you'll never have. I walked to our bedroom and started packing a suitcase. "Where are you going?" Allison demanded. "To my new house. The mansion I just inherited. You can stay here and figure out how to pay rent without my income." "You can't just leave me here." I turned to face her. "Watch me." As I headed for the door, Will grabbed my arm. "You think you're hot crap now? You think money changes who you are? You're still the same loser you were this morning." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. "Will, let me give you some advice. The pathetic loser you're talking about just became very, very rich, and he's got a very, very good memory." I shook off his grip and walked out, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their affair and my marriage. The Gutman mansion was everything I'd imagined and more. Sitting on 12 acres overlooking the harbor, it was the kind of place you see in movies about old money families with dark secrets. Gothic architecture, floor-to-ceiling windows, and rooms I didn't even have names for. But what I loved most about it was the silence. No Allison complaining about my failures, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just blessed, expensive quiet. I spent my first morning exploring, trying to wrap my head around the fact that this was all mine. The master bedroom was larger than my entire apartment. The kitchen had appliances I didn't know how to use. The library contained more books than I'd read in my lifetime. In Harold's study, I found more letters, dozens of them, addressed to his dead son, David. Harold had been writing to him every week for 8 years, telling him about his day, his regrets, his hopes. The last letter, dated the day before Harold died, mentioned me. "David, I met someone today who reminded me of you. A young man named Jack, down on his luck but not broken by it. I've decided to give him what I couldn't give you, a second chance. I hope you'd approve." I was still reading when my phone rang. Robert Gold. "Jack, I hope you're settling in well. We need to discuss some practical matters. Your inheritance includes several business interests that require immediate attention." "What kind of business interests?" "Real estate development, primarily, including some projects that directly compete with Pritchard Holdings." I smiled. "Tell me more." Gold explained that Harold had been quietly buying up properties around the city for years, often outbidding companies like Will's. The portfolio was worth millions and gave me significant influence over several major development projects. "There's also the matter of your wife," Gold continued. "I assume she'll be contesting the divorce settlement?" "Actually, I haven't filed yet. I'm still deciding how to handle that. Might I suggest moving quickly? The longer you wait, the more complicated her claims become." After hanging up, I called my bank. The joint accounts I shared with Allison showed several attempted transactions that morning, all declined due to insufficient funds. I'd moved my money to new accounts the night before. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison. "Jack, my card isn't working. There's something wrong with our account." I typed back, "There's nothing wrong with your account. Check your balance." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "You bastard! You can't do this to me. Watch me." The next text came an hour later. "Will says you can't legally cut me off from marital assets. I'm calling a lawyer. Good luck affording one." I spent the afternoon with Robert Gold, learning about my new financial situation. The inheritance was structured in a way that protected it from divorce proceedings, especially given Allison's infidelity. Harold had been thorough. "There is one thing you should know," Gold said as we wrapped up. "William Pritchard has been trying to buy several of your properties for months. Harold always refused to sell." "What kind of properties?" "Waterfront lots, prime development land. Pritchard needs them to complete a major project, some kind of luxury resort. Without them, his project is dead in the water. And now I own them." "Yes, Pritchard called this morning, actually. Wants to set up a meeting." I leaned back in my chair. "Set it up, but not here. Somewhere public." That evening, I drove to Murphy's Tavern, the dive bar where I used to meet my friend Eddie when I needed to escape Allison's constant criticism. Eddie was working behind the bar, his weathered face lighting up when he saw me. "Jack, heard you came into some money. That true? Where'd you hear that?" "Your wife was in here an hour ago, crying into a martini, telling anyone who'd listened that you'd stolen her inheritance." I laughed. "Her inheritance? That's what she said. Also said you'd be crawling back within a week, begging her forgiveness. What do you think?" Eddie looked me up and down, taking in my new clothes, the expensive watch Harold had left me. "I think Allison's about to learn what the word consequences means." We were interrupted by the sound of the door slamming open. Will Pritchard strode in like he owned the place, his face red with anger. He spotted me at the bar and marched over. "We need to talk," he demanded. "Hello, Will. Fancy seeing you here. I wouldn't have thought Murphy's was your kind of establishment." "Cut the crap, Jack. I know what you're trying to do." "Enlighten me. Those waterfront properties. Harold promised to sell them to me." I took a sip of my beer. Funny thing about promises from dead men, they're not legally binding. Will's jaw tightened. "I've got investors counting on those lots. I've already put millions into this project. Sounds like a personal problem." "Listen, you little crap." Eddie cleared his throat loudly. "Gentlemen, let's keep this civil." Will ignored him. "You want to play games? Fine. But you have no idea who you're messing with. I've got friends in this city. Connections. I can make your life very difficult." I stood up slowly, enjoying the fact that I was taller than Will by several inches. "Will, let me explain something to you. Yesterday, you were screwing my wife in my bed while talking about what a pathetic loser I am. Today, I own properties you desperately need, and you're begging me to sell them to you. Do you see the irony here? I'm not begging for anything." "No? Then I guess you don't need those lots after all." I threw a 20 on the bar. "Eddie, drinks are on me tonight. Will was just leaving." Will grabbed my arm as I headed for the door. "This isn't over." I looked down at his hand, then back at his face. "Will, I'm going to give you some free advice. The next time you grab me, you'd better be prepared for what happens next." His grip loosened. I walked out, leaving him standing there while the entire bar watched. The next morning brought a series of increasingly frantic texts from Allison. "Jack, please call me. We need to talk. The landlord says you canceled the lease. Where am I supposed to go? This is cruel. I know I hurt you, but this is too much. Will says you're trying to destroy his business. Why are you doing this?" I was reading them over coffee in my new kitchen when Robert Gold called. "Jack, Pritchard's lawyer contacted me. They're offering $15 million for the waterfront lots. Counter with 30. 30 million? Jack, they're worth maybe 20 on the open market. Will needs them more than I need his money. 30 million, take it or leave it. And if he says no, then I'll build something myself, maybe low-income housing, really class up the neighborhood." Gold chuckled. "You're learning quickly." That afternoon, I drove to Allison's office. She worked as a legal assistant at a mid-tier firm downtown, the kind of place that handled divorces and personal injury cases. I'd only been there once before, for their Christmas party, where Allison had introduced me to her colleagues with barely concealed embarrassment. The receptionist, a young woman named Rita, looked surprised to see me. "Jack, Allison's not here. She called in sick today. Actually, I wanted to talk to you and anyone else who might be interested in the truth about my wife." Rita's eyes lit up with curiosity. Office gossip was clearly her favorite pastime. "What kind of truth?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made the previous afternoon. Allison's voice came through clearly. "Jack's pathetic. He'll never amount to anything. Will's going to take care of me once I figure out how to dump the loser without losing money." Rita's mouth fell open. "When did she say this?" "Yesterday, to her friend Becca. The same Becca who's been helping her plan her affair with Will Pritchard." "Will Pritchard? The married guy with the development company?" "The very same. Interesting how Allison never mentioned he was married, isn't it?" By the time I left the office, Rita was already on her phone spreading the news. Allison's reputation was about to take a serious hit. That evening, Will called me directly. "You son of a witch," he said without preamble. 30 million? Are you insane? Supply and demand, Will. You need something I have. I don't need anything you have. I'm not paying 30 million for those lots. Then don't. I'm sure your investors will understand when you explain that your project failed because you were too cheap to pay market rates. Market rates? Those lots aren't worth half that. They are to you. But hey, if you'd rather explain to your wife how you lost millions because you were too busy screwing around with my wife to focus on business, that's your choice. The silence stretched out. Finally, Will spoke again, his voice tight with rage. You think you've won something here? You think money makes you better than me? No, Will. Money just gives me the power to show everyone what you really are. And what's that? A mediocre man who mistakes arrogance for confidence and thinks his wallet makes him important. The only difference between us is that I earned my money through luck and kindness. You inherited yours through accident of birth. You don't know anything about me. I know you're married with 2 kids and you're cheating on your wife with mine. I know you're leveraged up to your eyeballs on a project that can't succeed without my properties. And I know you're desperate enough to call me personally instead of going through lawyers. I could hear him breathing heavily. What do you want, Jack? Really? What's this all about? It's about consequences, Will. You and Allison thought you could treat me like garbage because I was poor and powerless. Now I'm rich and powerful, and you're learning what it feels like to be on the other side. So this is revenge? This is justice. I hung up and poured myself a glass of Harold's expensive scotch. Through the mansion's windows, I could see the harbor lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, Will was probably calling Allison, trying to figure out how to salvage their situation. But I wasn't done with them yet. Not even close. The private investigator Robert Gold recommended was a woman named Sarah Chen, a former police detective who specialized in financial crimes. She met me at the mansion the next morning, professional and direct. Mr. Gold says you need information on William Pritchard. Everything you can find. Financial, personal, professional. I want to know what he had for breakfast and who he owes money to. Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's pretty comprehensive. Mind if I ask why? He's been sleeping with my wife and calling me a loser. Now I'm rich and he needs something I own. I want to know exactly how much leverage I have. Revenge investigation. I've done a few of those. She quoted me a daily rate that would have been impossible a week ago. I'll need a retainer. I wrote her a check for $50,000. How long do you think this will take? For a man like Pritchard, he's probably got skeletons in every closet. Give me a week. While Sarah worked, I focused on making Allison's life as difficult as possible within the bounds of the law. I canceled our joint credit cards, removed her as a beneficiary from my life insurance, and had Robert Gold send her a formal notice that I was filing for divorce on grounds of adultery. Her response came through her hastily hired lawyer, a bottom feeder named Marcus Webb, who specialized in desperate cases. Mercer, Webb said when he called, my client is willing to discuss a reasonable settlement. Define reasonable. 50% of marital assets plus alimony. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Webb, you might want to research the inheritance laws in this state, and while you're at it, look up the definition of adultery. My client disputes the adultery allegation. I have video. The line went quiet. Video. Security cameras, Webb. Amazing what technology can do these days. Your client and Mr. Pritchard were very energetic in their performance. That's illegal surveillance. Actually, it's not. I have every right to record activity in my own home, especially when I'm not the one doing the recording. Another silence. What do you mean? I mean, Allison set up the cameras herself 6 months ago, supposedly for security. She just forgot to turn them off before bringing her boyfriend home. This was a lie, but Webb didn't know that. The truth was, I'd installed the cameras after finding Will's clothes, but Webb's nervous breathing told me he believed my version. Mr. Mercer, perhaps we can work something out. Here's what we can work out. Allison gets nothing. No settlement, no alimony, nothing. In exchange, I don't release the security footage to the internet. That's blackmail. That's consequences. I hung up and immediately called Sarah Chen. How's the investigation going? Better than expected. Pritchard's got problems, big ones, such as he's been embezzling from his own company, skimming money from investor accounts to cover personal expenses. I've got bank records showing transfers to offshore accounts, payments to casinos, some very expensive gifts to women who aren't his wife. How much are we talking about? At least $3 million over the past 2 years, maybe more. That's felony territory. It gets better. His luxury resort project? It's a house of cards. He's been using money from new investors to pay returns to old investors. Classic Ponzi scheme structure. I felt a predatory smile spread across my face. What happens if the project fails? He goes to prison, and his investors lose everything. Sarah, I want you to compile everything into a comprehensive report. Bank records, transaction logs, investor communications, everything. What are you planning to do with it? I'm going to give Will Pritchard a choice. That evening, I arranged to meet Will at an upscale restaurant downtown. He arrived looking haggard, his usual confidence replaced by barely concealed desperation. Jack, thank you for meeting me. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Did we? I thought we got off on exactly the right foot. You were screwing my wife and calling me a loser. I was poor and powerless. Very that straightforward dynamic. Will forced a laugh. Look, about Allison. That was a mistake. She came on to me and I was weak. It didn't mean anything. Funny, she said the same thing about you. His face darkened. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're both liars who deserve each other, but we're not here to discuss your relationship. We're here to discuss your business. I slid Sarah's report across the table. Will's face went white as he read the first page. Where did you get this? Does it matter? The question is, what are you going to do about it? This is private financial information. Obtaining it illegally. Nothing illegal about it, Will. Amazing what becomes public record when you know where to look. Will flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. What do you want? I want you to understand your situation. You need my properties to save your project. Without them, your investors lose their money and start asking uncomfortable questions about where their previous investments went. You're talking about destroying people's lives. I'm talking about consequences. You stole money, Will. You lied to investors. You cheated on your wife. You helped my wife betray me. Now you get to face the results of those choices. Will leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. How much do you want? For the properties? For your silence? For all of it? I don't want your money, Will. Then what? I want you to understand what it feels like to be powerless. I stood up and dropped a $100 bill on the table. Think about it. You've got 48 hours to decide whether you want to buy those properties for $30 million or explain to federal investigators why your books don't balance. As I walked away, I heard Will call after me. Jack, you can't do this! But I was already gone, leaving him alone with the wreckage of his carefully constructed lies. The next morning brought a call from Detective Ray Halloran, a grizzled cop who looked like he'd stepped out of a noir film. Mr. Mercer, I need to ask you some questions about William Pritchard. What kind of questions? The kind that involve financial fraud and extortion allegations. My blood ran cold. Extortion? Mr. Pritchard claims you're blackmailing him with illegally obtained financial information. Detective, I think you'd better come see me in person. And you might want to bring someone from the Financial Crimes Unit. Halloran arrived an hour later with a younger detective named Torres. I served them coffee in Harold's study and laid out everything I had on Will. Pritchard came to you? I asked. This morning. Claimed you were trying to extort $30 million from him. Did he mention why I might have leverage over him? Halloran's eyes narrowed. Why don't you tell me? I handed him Sarah's report. Because he's been embezzling from his investors and running a Ponzi scheme. Torres whistled as he read over Halloran's shoulder. This is detailed stuff. How'd you get it? I hired a private investigator. Everything in that report comes from public records, court filings, and legitimate financial databases. And the $30 million? That's what I'm asking for properties he wants to buy. Market rate is, given how badly he needs them. Halloran looked up from the report. You're saying this isn't extortion? Detective, if I wanted to blackmail Will Pritchard, would I be showing you evidence of his crimes? I'm asking a fair price for real estate. The fact that he's desperate enough to pay it because he's embezzled money from investors isn't my problem. Torres was still reading. Mr. Mercer, this is enough evidence to file charges. Why haven't you gone to the FBI? Because I wanted to give Will a chance to do the right thing. If he buys my properties at fair market value, he can complete his project and pay back his investors. Everyone wins. And if he doesn't, then I guess his investors deserve to know where their money went. Halloran closed the report. Mr. Mercer, I have to ask, is this about the money or about revenge? Detective, my wife was sleeping with Will Pritchard while telling him what a pathetic loser I was. Then I inherited $89 million and suddenly became the owner of properties he desperately needs. You tell me what this is about. Halloran actually smiled. Sounds like karma to me. After the detectives left, I called Robert Gold. The police were here about Will. He's getting desperate. How desperate? Desperate enough to file false extortion charges, which means he's probably desperate enough to do something stupid, such as, I don't know. But I want security cameras installed around the mansion. And maybe you should recommend a good security company. Jack, are you worried about your safety? I looked out at the harbor, thinking about Will's face when he read Sarah's report. Robert, I just destroyed a man's life with a stack of papers, yeah. I'm a little worried about my safety. That night, alone in Harold's mansion, I poured myself a scotch and tried to figure out how I'd gotten here. A week ago, I was driving strangers around for tips. Now I was orchestrating the downfall of a man who'd wronged me, using resources I'd never dreamed of having. Harold's letter was still on the desk where I'd left it. The best revenge against people who underestimate you is to prove them spectacularly wrong. I was certainly doing that. But as I sat in the dark, listening to the wind off the harbor, I wondered if Harold would approve of what I was becoming. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're going to regret this. I poured another scotch and smiled. Will Pritchard was about to learn that threats only work when you have something left to lose. And thanks to Sarah Chen's investigation, Will was rapidly running out of things to lose. The security system was installed the next morning by a company that specialized in protecting wealthy clients from various threats. Motion sensors, cameras, panic buttons, and a direct line to both the police and a private security firm. Expecting trouble, Mr. Mercer? Asked the lead installer, a former military guy named Pete. Let's just say I've made some enemies recently. The kind of enemies who might try something physical? I thought about Will's text message. Possibly. Pete nodded grimly. We'll set you up right, but Mr. Mercer? If someone's desperate enough to come after you at home, cameras won't stop them. They'll just help the police figure out who did it afterward. What would you recommend? Stay alert, vary your routines, and maybe think about hiring personal protection until this blows over. After Pete's team finished, I called Sarah Chen. I need you to expand the investigation. Look into Will's associates, his business partners, anyone who might be willing to help him with extracurricular activities. You think he's going to try something? I think he's a cornered animal with millions of dollars at stake. Cornered animals do unpredictable things. Sarah's expanded report arrived that afternoon. Will's business associates included several men with criminal records. Nothing major, mostly financial crimes, tax evasion, that sort of thing, but enough to suggest Will wasn't above bending rules when necessary. More interesting was his relationship with a man named Tommy Torino, who owned several businesses around the city and had suspected connections to organized crime. Nothing proven, but enough smoke to suggest fire. I was reading through Tommy's file when my phone rang. Robert Gold. Jack, we have a problem. Allison's lawyer filed an emergency motion claiming you're hiding marital assets. What assets? The inheritance. Webb is arguing that since you received it during the marriage, it should be considered community property. I laughed. Robert, didn't you explain about Harold's stipulation? I did, but Webb is claiming the stipulation is legally invalid. Something about public policy and punitive conditions. Can he make that stick? Probably not, but it'll tie things up in court for months. And Jack, there's something else. Webb somehow got hold of information about your meeting with Will at the restaurant. He's claiming you're using the inheritance to conduct illegal business activities. My blood went cold. How could he know about that meeting? I don't know, but he's asking for a court order, freezing your assets pending investigation. Can he do that? If he can convince a judge you're using inherited money for illegal purposes? Maybe. I hung up and immediately called Detective Halloran. Detective, I need to know something. Did you tell anyone about Will Pritchard's visit to your station? Why would I do that? Because somehow Allison's lawyer knows about my meeting with Will, and he's using it to claim I'm conducting illegal business. Halloran was quiet for a moment. Mr. Mercer, police reports are public record. If someone knew to look, who would know to look? Someone who knew Pritchard filed a complaint against you. The pieces clicked together. Will told Allison. Allison told her lawyer. Her lawyer is using Will's false extortion claim to attack my inheritance. That's a pretty serious accusation. Detective, I think Will and Allison are working together. The affair was just the beginning. Now they're trying to steal my inheritance through the courts. You have any proof of that? Not yet, but I will. I called Sarah Chen and asked her to investigate any connections between Will, Allison, and Marcus Webb. Then I did something that probably wasn't smart. I called Allison directly. Jack? She sounded surprised. I didn't think you were taking my calls. I'm not. I'm calling to give you a warning. What kind of warning? The kind that might keep you out of federal prison. Silence. Allison, I know you and Will are working together. I know about the court filings, the asset freeze, all of it. I don't know what you're talking about. You're trying to steal money that legally can't be given to you. That's fraud, Allison. Federal fraud. You're paranoid. Am I? Then explain how your lawyer knew about my private meeting with Will. More silence. Allison, I'm going to give you one chance to walk away from this. Drop the court filings, take the divorce settlement I offered, and disappear from my life. And if I don't, then you'll find out what happens when someone with unlimited resources decides to destroy you. You don't scare me, Jack. I should. I hung up and poured myself a drink. Outside, the sun was setting over the harbor, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Beautiful and peaceful, completely at odds with the war I was fighting. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. Last warning. This time, I didn't smile. I called the security company and asked them to send someone to watch the house overnight. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Sarah Chen called at 7 a.m., her voice tight with excitement. Jack, you need to see this. I've got proof that Will and Allison have been planning this for months. What kind of proof? Email exchanges, text messages, financial records showing payments from Will to Marcus Webb dating back 6 months. 6 months? But the affair started 8 months ago, Jack. They've been planning to take your money since before you had any money to take. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They knew about Harold? Will's been tracking Harold's investments for years, trying to figure out how to get access to his properties. When Harold changed his will to include you, Will saw an opportunity. So Allison was supposed to stay married to you long enough to establish community property rights to the inheritance. Then they'd divorce you and split the money. I sat down heavily. But Harold's stipulation, they didn't know about that. Their plan was to claim the inheritance as marital property and divide it in the divorce. What about the affair? If I'd never caught them, you weren't supposed to catch them. Will was supposed to end things with Allison after the inheritance came through. She was supposed to play the loving wife until the money was legally hers. Then why did I catch them? Sarah's voice was grim. Because Will got greedy. He decided he wanted both Allison and your money. So he started pushing her to speed up the timeline. I felt sick. The woman I'd been married to for 5 years had been planning to rob me before I even had anything worth stealing. The affair wasn't a betrayal. It was a business arrangement. Sarah, I want everything, every email, every text, every financial record. And I want it documented in a way that will hold up in court. What are you planning to do? I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. The evidence Sarah compiled was devastating. Emails between Will and Allison discussing the mark and the score. Text messages about timing the divorce to maximize their take. Financial records showing Will had paid for Allison's new clothes, her gym membership, even her lawyer. Most damning was an email from Will to Allison sent 3 days after Harold died. The old man left him everything. Stick to the plan, and we'll be rich by Christmas. I forwarded everything to Robert Gold, Detective Halloran, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Then I did something that felt almost anticlimactic. I called Will. Hello, Will. Jack. His voice was tight. I was hoping you'd call. I bet you were. Ready to discuss terms for those properties? Actually, yes. I think we can work something out. 30 million. Cash. Non-negotiable. That's a lot of money, Jack. It's what they're worth to you. Take it or leave it. I'll take it. I smiled. Excellent. Have your lawyer call Robert Gold. We'll have the papers drawn up immediately. Just like that? Just like that. Oh, and Will, you might want to check your email. I sent you something interesting. I hung up and waited. It took exactly 4 minutes for my phone to ring again. You bastard! Will's voice was shaking with rage. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. FBI's Financial Crimes Unit agrees with me. Funny thing about email servers, they keep copies of everything. This is entrapment. This is justice. You and Allison tried to steal my money, and now you get to face the consequences. What do you want? I want you to buy my properties for $30 million. I want Allison to drop her court filings. And I want both of you to disappear from my life. And if we do that, then maybe the FBI doesn't get copies of those emails. That's blackmail. That's a business transaction. You committed crimes, Will. I'm offering you a chance to make things right before the authorities get involved. The line was quiet for a long time. Finally, Will spoke, his voice defeated. How do I know you won't turn us in anyway? You don't, but consider the alternative. I turn you in now, and you go to prison with nothing. Or you pay me what you owe, and maybe you get to start over somewhere else. This is insane. This is what happens when you underestimate people, Will. You thought I was too stupid and too poor to fight back. You were wrong on both counts. After I hung up, I walked out to Harold's study and poured myself a scotch from his private collection. Through the window, I could see the harbor where Will's luxury resort was supposed to be built. Tomorrow, he'd wire $30 million to my account. Allison would drop her court filings, and both of them would disappear from my life forever. But somehow, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, like I'd won a war that never should have been fought in the first place. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You win. I typed back, no, I survived. Then I deleted the message and tried to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. The money transfer came through at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. $30 million wired from Will's business account to mine, with a memo line that read simply, property acquisition, waterfront lots. Robert Gold called to confirm the transaction. It's done, Jack. The properties are officially sold and the funds are in your account. What about Allison's court filings? Withdrawn this morning. Her lawyer filed a motion to dismiss all claims related to the inheritance. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt strangely hollow, like I'd won a game I never wanted to play. That afternoon, I drove to Murphy's Tavern to see Eddie. The bar was nearly empty. Just a few regulars, nursing beers and watching a baseball game on the ancient TV above the bar. "Jack!" Eddie's face lit up when he saw me. "Heard you closed that deal with Pritchard. 30 million, is that right? News travels fast. In a town this size, heck, everyone knows your business before you do." Eddie poured me a beer without being asked. "So what's next? You gonna build something on those lots?" "I don't know. Maybe." Eddie studied my face. "You don't look like a man who just made $30 million. How should I look? Happier, for starters." I took a long drink of beer. "Eddie, can I ask you something? If someone wronged you, really wronged you, and you had the power to destroy them, would you do it? Depends on what they did. They betrayed you, lied to you, tried to steal everything you had." Eddie was quiet for a moment, wiping down glasses with a bar towel. "Jack, I've known you for 3 years. You're not a vindictive man. Heck, you used to tip the homeless guys who hung around outside your apartment building. So if you're asking me whether you should destroy someone, I'm guessing you already know the answer." "Do I?" "You tell me. How do you feel right now?" I thought about it. Empty, like I won something that wasn't worth winning. "Then there's your answer." We were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. I turned to see Allison walk in, looking older than her 32 years. She'd lost weight and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Jack." She approached the bar cautiously, like she was approaching a dangerous animal. "Can we talk?" Eddie looked between us, then found something urgent that needed his attention at the other end of the bar. "What do you want, Allison?" "I want to apologize." "For which part? The affair, the lies, or trying to steal my inheritance?" She flinched. "All of it. Jack, I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to understand." "Understand what? That you were planning to rob me before I even had money to steal?" "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I've seen the emails, Allison. The mark, remember, that's what you called me." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Will convinced me that you'd never amount to anything, that I was wasting my life with you. He said if we played it smart, we could both have better lives. So you decided to destroy mine. I was scared, Jack. Scared of being poor forever, scared of watching you fail at everything you tried. When Will offered me a way out, you took it, even if it meant betraying someone who loved you. I know, and I hate myself for it." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. The woman I'd married was still there, underneath the guilt and desperation. But she was also a stranger, someone capable of planning my destruction with clinical precision. "Allison, why are you here? The deal's done. You got what you wanted." "I didn't get what I wanted. I lost everything that mattered. You lost everything that you threw away." She nodded, wiping her eyes with a bar napkin. "Will's leaving town. His business is finished. His wife filed for divorce, and the FBI is investigating him for fraud. And I'm alone, completely alone. My friends won't talk to me. I lost my job, and I can't afford my apartment. Consequences, Allison. I know, I'm not asking for your pity. I wanted you to know that I realize what I lost. You were a good husband, and I threw it away for money that wasn't even real." She stood up, leaving a $10 bill on the bar. "I'm leaving town too. Starting over somewhere else. I just wanted to say goodbye." As she walked toward the door, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was Eddie's words about not being vindictive, or maybe it was seeing Allison broken and defeated, but I found myself calling after her. "Allison, wait." She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes. "The apartment. I'll pay the rent for 6 months, give you time to get back on your feet." "Jack, I can't." "It's not for you, it's for me. So I can sleep at night knowing I'm better than you thought I was." She started crying again, but nodded. "Thank you." After she left, Eddie came back over. "That was decent of you. Was it stupid? Maybe, but decent." I finished my beer and drove home to Harold's mansion. The security guards waved as I passed through the gate, and I realized I'd started thinking of this place as home. Not Harold's house, but mine. In Harold's study, I found myself reading his letters to his dead son again. One passage stood out. "David, I've been thinking about revenge lately. About all the people who wronged me over the years and how satisfying it would be to pay them back. But you know what I realized? Revenge is a luxury that costs more than money. It costs your soul. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming someone they could never be. I poured myself a scotch and walked out to the terrace overlooking the harbor. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and red. Somewhere out there, Will was probably packing his belongings, preparing to start over in a new city with a new identity. My phone rang. Sarah Chen. Jack, I wanted to let you know the FBI arrested Will this afternoon. For what? Embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. Turns out he stole a lot more money than we thought. He's looking at serious prison time. What about the $30 million he paid me? That's clean money. Came from his legitimate business accounts, not the embezzled funds. So I get to keep it? You get to keep all of it. The properties were legally yours, and he paid fair market value for them. After hanging up, I walked back inside and sat down at Harold's desk. There was something I needed to do. I opened my laptop and began typing. Dear Harold, I hope you don't mind me writing to you the way you wrote to David. It feels like the right thing to do. I wanted to thank you for the inheritance, but more than that, I wanted to thank you for the lesson. You were right about revenge. It costs more than money. For a while there, I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who took pleasure in other people's pain. But I remembered what you wrote about David, about how proud you were of the man he became. I realized I wanted to be someone you'd be proud of, too. I'm going to use your money to build something good. Maybe a foundation to help people who are down on their luck, like I was. Maybe something to honor David's memory. I haven't figured it out yet, but I will. Thank you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Thank you for giving me a second chance, and thank you for teaching me that the best revenge against people who underestimate you isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. Your friend, Jack Mercer. I printed the letter and put it in Harold's desk drawer, next to his letters to David. Then I called Robert Gold. Robert, I want to set up a charitable foundation, something to help people who are struggling financially. That's a wonderful idea, Jack. What did you want to call it? I looked at Harold's photograph on the desk, then at the harbor lights twinkling in the distance. The Second Chance Foundation. Perfect. I'll have the paperwork drawn up. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not the hollow satisfaction of revenge, but the quiet contentment of knowing I'd chosen to be better than my worst impulses. Will Pritchard would go to prison for his crimes. Allison would have to live with the consequences of her choices. But I would build something good from the wreckage of our relationships. Harold was right. The best revenge against people who underestimate you is becoming someone they could never be. And for the first time since this whole thing began, I was proud of the man I was becoming. 6 months later, the Second Chance Foundation had helped over 200 people get back on their feet. Ex-convicts looking for work, single mothers struggling with bills, students who couldn't afford college tuition, people like I used to be, down on their luck but not broken by it. I never heard from Will again. The newspapers reported that he was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His wife divorced him and moved to California with their children. Allison sent me a postcard from Seattle, where she'd found work as a paralegal. No message, just her signature. I took it as a thank you for the apartment rent, which I'd paid as promised. Eddie still poured my beer without being asked when I stopped by Murphy's. The regulars treated me the same as always, which I appreciated more than they knew. And every evening, I sat in Harold's study and wrote letters to him, telling him about the foundation, about the people we'd helped, about the man I was trying to become. I never got rich for the right reasons, but I learned to use wealth for the right purposes. And in the end, that made all the difference.